Good morning, day 216. The sun is risen. It was such a beautiful sunrise this morning. For those of you all that maybe don't watch every day or want to see the sunrise, but sometimes I come a little bit later because I like to watch it and I take lots of pictures. You can see those pictures when I do my written posts. And someday soon, as I have a little bit more energy and time, because this takes a lot of time to do. I had no idea what I was getting into, and this whole process has kind of taken on a life of its own, which has given me renewed life and energy. Like, I have been listening to a lot of neuroscience lately, and some different experts talking, and I have kind of tripped into something that's really healthy and good for you. Who knew? But that's what God does. He tells you, listen, and when he suggests that you do something and you hear that, that inner knowing, that quiet voice, listen and start doing it. Lean into it, because it's all in the Bible. It's like scientists are now kind of discovering what God's been saying all along through the Bible. But getting bright sunlight early in the morning, doing intense mental exercises, which in order for me to talk with any kind of make sense at all after what I've read, I've got to read with a whole nother level of intentness. And that's what we should be doing every day or often, really reading something as if you're going to have to turn around and do something like this, teach on it. That doesn't mean you actually have to go do it, but really getting into something at that deep of a level. I'm going to walk around here. I'm going to go off into the wilderness. We're going to talk off the path and into the wilderness, which is what I'm going to talk about today. I read Luke 3, which is mostly about, well, at least half about John the Baptist. And we call him John the Baptist. I don't know if they called him that then. But he was known for baptizing people and baptizing the one. And he was the waymaker for the waymaker. And in order to be the waymaker for the waymaker, they had to put him kind of away, so that his way wouldn't get polluted, diluted. He wouldn't be taken off his path by living in regular community. Because he's fully human, and humans are easily influenced and diverted off of their path. But we knew since birth, when we learned about Elizabeth and Gabriel visiting Zachariah, John's dad, that John was going to be set aside for a purpose, and they were even told that he would need to be in the wilderness. And I never really stopped to think about that. You hear these things, if you're around the church at all for any length of time, you hear about these things, at least I did, but you don't really stop and question them, right? But it's kind of interesting. Why? That was the word that my brain honed in on this morning with God. I'm like, tell me, God, why was the wilderness so important for John? And of course, back in the Old Testament, we learned about the Israelites getting kind of stuck in the wilderness and being prevented from going to the promised land because they just couldn't quite get their act together. And maybe it was even Moses who didn't quite get his act together, and kept trying to step kind of in front of God, and ahead of God's timing and direction. Anyway, we're not talking about that today. We're going to talk about John and the intention or the importance of John living his, formative years in the wilderness, and before he steps out into his ministry, which his ministry is paving the way for Jesus. And he is making path straight. He's going back and forth across the Jordan River. All the things he's doing have been foretold in Isaiah, and he's fulfilling the scripture. But what I really thought about and pondered this morning, I was like, it's hard to stay on your path and not be influenced by other people when you live in society. I'm actually going through that right now. Part of what I'm doing, even my little adventure with reading the Bible, I have intentionally shut out reading any other commentaries as much as I can. Every once in a while I get a little stuck or I need to know something, and I'll do very intentional little looking up of things. But for the most part, I'm trying to shut it all out. I'm not doing any devotions, anything that I'm just shutting it all out. So I'm kind of in the wilderness in my own mind with the Bible, because I want to get my message from God and my understanding of the Bible. I don't want it being influenced anymore. Like I've done that. I want to become like an adult and eat my own food, chew my own food. And I think all of those things. So this is, and I say this every time I mention it, this is not to downplay the importance of all those things and the value that all of those things can have. Heck, it's what I'm doing. And I'm hoping that what I write encourages somebody in their season when they're reading these things. But I think it is important for people to go, yes, right, for people to go and do these things on their own so that you can own your own faith or your own knowledge about a subject. Like, really, at some point, you take in all the instruction and all the outside, and you need that. It's foundational. It helps us get a foundation. But at some point, you've got to go, you know what? I need to shut all this out and do it my way. I've got to really dig into it and learn it and figure it out on my own. And I think that's kind of what the intent, or at least part of the intent of John kind of being sequestered in the wilderness, so that because he knew who he was, his parents knew who he was, and all of that needed to be preserved and unadulterated, and set apart for the right timing. And it would be more trustworthy that way too. It was John's message from God, John's mission, God's message through John. And that we don't really question that, and I think that's partly because he was set apart from that modern day society for a time. And even some of the things and messages that he was talking about, even the language that he was using, what's wrong with you, brood of snakes? Like, he's talking about natural things that he probably encountered. You think you can be saved just because you're Jewish, you're descendants of Abraham? No, you've got to live right. And in order to live right and get credit for living right, it's got to come from the heart. And he's really trying to get this message across. And the people follow him. A lot of people think he is the Messiah. But he says, no, I'm not even fit to tie his shoes. So anyway, that was sort of what in my approach and how I'm trying to read the Bible too. I'm a practical gal. God made me to be He made me to be a dreamer, but then to take whatever that dreaminess is with boots on the ground. Like, how do I live this out? So I've got a little bit of that dreaminess, but I need to know how to apply things and how to make sense of, like, why does this matter to me? Why should I spend my time doing this and reading this and learning this if I can't use it? I want things to be useful. So that's part of how God made me. And so that is part of what I'm looking for when I'm reading. And that is what I took away is that allow yourself to have some very intentional wilderness seasons. Some people do that even if it's a retreat now and then, like to turn off your phones, allow yourself to just be with you, maybe with a couple of other people for a purpose, to maybe plan out your year, go deep with a subject like I'm doing, or with a task that you've always kind of wanted to have more confidence about, but you don't. Like, the way to get confidence, interestingly enough, and very like God to make it this way, you've got to be willing to be completely new at something, a beginner. And we don't like that as adults, but it's so good for us. And the neuroscience is proving it. Allowing yourself to be new at something, to go into the wilderness with something and go kind of all in, like, let me figure this out. Like, it's good brain exercise. It's exciting. It adds, you hear me use the word adventure all the time. This is my version of adventure. Learning and like conquering a subject, or at least figuring it out. Not conquering, that's not right. But figuring it out on my own, and then having faith, and having knowledge, and not only knowledge, but I'm embodying it. I am walking it out, literally. And there's also something to be said for that. When you listen, like to a podcast or maybe an Audible book, and you're walking, you create even a more direct association. We are given bodies for a reason. And in modern day society, we sit on our tushes way, way too much. And me included, that's totally where I was. As a 9, that's sort of my deadly sin. I can get real comfortable. That's why I'm doing this. And I've learned how to love being uncomfortable, because the reward I get from it, and even sharing it with other people, that's so exciting to me. And that even one person might benefit. Hey, good morning, you guys. Let me show you the sun. Look at that. Beautiful, beautiful. I can stand here all day. It's just beautiful. Got a beautiful morning. It's going to be hot. But I love the heat, all the seasons, all the weather now. The wilderness, allowing yourself to get back in touch with nature, literally, but your natural state, your natural gifting, what your mind will think of something, and not just somebody else's interpretation of it. God made us, like, we are powerful. We have these supercomputers up here. It's time to activate them and really put them to work, upgrade, put new software in there, and learn a new skill. It doesn't have to be, like, I love like intellectual endeavors, but you do you. I was just looking at somebody as I was driving here, somebody that has a real talent for gardening, and their house is just beautiful, with all of the different flowers. Like, that doesn't interest me. I don't want to spend my time doing that, but I appreciate it. And I love that somebody is investing their talents where their talents are. Maybe for you it's music or art, or you name it. Taking a foreign language class, volunteering. Like, get out there and use your special talents. But sometimes, and if you've lost touch with that, do a little wilderness project on your own. Like, shut out all the noise, all the other teachers, and you just get in there and play with your mind and your imagination and your talents, and see what God will speak to you about. All right, that is my practical, hopefully applicable nugget and reflection for the day. And maybe even just go out for a nature walk. Find a nice local park. I love to go to new parks. That's the other thing. I'm so blessed and lucky to have this close to my house, but I love to go all over the state, even all over our city. So get out and find a park, or drive a different way to work or the grocery store, wherever get off of your normal path and explore and get reconnected to your natural state. And we have to get out of our normal routines, away from other people's ideas, sometimes intentionally, not forever, for a season, so that we can get back in touch with who we really are and why God created us and why we're here. Life does have a purpose, but you have to be engaged in figuring that out. All right, rise and shine. All right, I read Luke 3 again today. For anybody that wants to read Luke, the first 3 chapters are a doozy. And Luke 3 did not disappoint at the ending too. Jesus is, of course, baptized, and that's a beautiful scene. And then we go through the genealogy, and not only is Jesus directly a descendant of David, but also it traces it all the way back to Adam, literally the Son of Man. All right, talk to y'all later.